Hello, everyone. I'm your host for today's webinar, Mark O'Brien, Director at CM First. Thank you very much to the CA, now called the Broadcom community, for hosting today's webinar on IBM security, Broadcom news, and 3 technical lightning talks. First thing I have is a poll question for the community on today's activities. So can we pull that poll question up? Which is, which topics or / themes do you want to see more of in our 2019 webinars? We try and have a webinar every quarter, so 4 of them a year. And so your input in the community is really important and determines, like today's theme is security. Okay, voting is now concluded. And I'll tell you the winners, modernization slightly edged out. Roadmaps, tips, and techniques, obviously the top 3, followed by DevOps and application security. Thank you very much for that. So the agenda for today, we're going to be leading off with Cindy Compert. Very pleased to have Cindy joining us this morning or this afternoon. She's IBM Security CTO, talking about commencing your journey on growing data security and privacy wave in North America. Very timely talk about GDPR. And there'll be a follow-up to this in more depth on Thursday of this week as well, too. Next, we'll be having product and Broadcom news updates on for both Plex and 2E by Chirag Dave and Diraj Prasad. And then the first of our lightning talks, actually with Arun, sorry, that's a mistake. Anyway. Arun will talk from Broadcom, then followed by another lightning talk with Andrew of CM First, and then lastly a CA2E timely talk by Eamon. So sorry for the mix-up in the speaker stuff there, but anyway, you'll be impressed. We do have an important announcement. The 10th Worldwide User Community Conference is coming up. Be arriving Sunday evening, April 28th. So it'll be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then half of Thursday through May 2nd. And it's going to be in the Fort Lauderdale, Florida area. We're narrowing down our choices on venues, and I'll have more information to say about that shortly. But now, what would be important would be to go to the plex2e.com/conference, or just to the homepage, and then join the mailing list. We'll be having more information about that shortly. As you may know, Christoph Heinrich and Amy Lugaville are our community co-presidents for, and the conference is a very big activity for them. So also some housekeeping, and remember to place your questions into the console on the dashboard so that we can use them in either of our Q&A sessions. So first, we have Cindy Compert, IBM Security CTO. Cindy is a distinguished engineer and security CTO in the U.S. public sector market. She's also CTO of data security and privacy for IBM Security. She's active in organizations such as IAPP and a certified privacy technologist. She's an industry expert on the EU GDPR privacy regulations and data security. We have a lot of attendees from Europe on today's webinar. She co-authored a recent IBM GDPR study, invented IBM's security GDPR framework, and has appeared on Yahoo Finance, quoted in Barron's and eWeek. Also has co-authored the Information Governance Principles and Practices for a Big Data Landscape, which is an IBM Red Book, and holds a patent on mobile caller risk using AI techniques. So without further ado, I'm introducing Cindy Compert.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the introduction. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. So today I'm going to share a high-level discussion on what I see happening in the industry, especially regarding the regulatory landscape and privacy. Privacy is becoming more of a requirement and very likely is going to impact your organization, if it already hasn't, with GDPR, the European General Data Protection Regulation. that started enforcement back on May 25th. Seems like forever ago, but it's not that long ago. And I'll talk about why everyone needs to care about this development of privacy and why it's so important, and some steps that you can take to prepare. So let's go to the next slide. And what I think has been so interesting, Mark, if you could go to the next slide, please, is in today's highly regulated global environment, there are so many demands on compliance. And already we have over 100 countries that have data protection regulations around the world. Now, there's a very well-known law firm, DLA Piper, and they used to have a chart available that had those regulations all on one chart. But when we hit 100 countries 3 years ago, they decided they could no longer put every regulation in text on the chart. So now it's more of a heat map. And even in the U.S. alone, there's 20 specific or even national data security laws. There's hundreds of sector-specific laws. Each of the 50 states now has breached regulations, which it didn't even a few years ago. We still had a few outliers. Even California alone, where I'm based, has more than 25 privacy and data security laws. So, there's a whole host of regulations you're probably dealing with already, whether that's PCI for credit card, SOX if you're a public company. It could be something sectoral like HIPAA. And now in the US especially, we see a new regulation, another 4-letter acronym, CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. And that is going to be coming into effect on January 1st, 2020. The only thing is it requires you to provide data starting January 1st, 2019, which is just a few weeks away. So it's actually much closer than we think about. So, the challenge is that organizations are grossly overestimating the overlaps between those standards and also the effort to implement. And they think they're typically covered with one standard, but it really takes a concerted effort to build especially a privacy program if you want to be compliant on a continuous basis. So let's go to the next slide, please. And I like to think of the theme for this year as privacy please, privacy goes public, because there's two factors at play. So we talked a bit about regulation. The second is consumer attitudes. They have shifted tremendously in the past 3 years. Now, our friends in Europe have always been more mindful of privacy. Even before GDPR, there are regulations in place. And even Canada has been regulated a little bit more tightly in terms of most of the time you have to opt in to receive a communication, as an example. But in the US especially, the attitudes have shifted tremendously. I'll give you some examples. IBM, we did a study with Harris earlier this year of 10,000 consumers. We found that 75% of consumers will not buy from companies they don't trust, no matter how great their product or service. And that is a real shift from what it was even a few short years ago. We also have seen a couple of healthcare studies in the last year or two that also show this shift. Aetna in particular did a health ambition study over the summer of 1,000 consumers, and what they found is consumers value privacy and data protection more than the cost of care. That's shocking. When we think about the high cost of healthcare, the fact that consumers want privacy and data security even more than cost of care, that really is top of mind. Accenture also did a study, and what they saw is that 25% of consumers who were breached by their healthcare provider, they changed their healthcare provider. Think about that. What would happen if you lost 1 out of 4 of your customers overnight? And it is a ripple effect, because if a consumer doesn't trust you, not only will they not buy from you, they won't want to work for you or even partner with you. So it really is a ripple effect. And I think companies are starting to wake up to the fact that regulation is not just about avoiding fines or, staying off the front page of the news. So let's go to the next slide, please. So, let's say you didn't have to comply with GDPR. Perhaps you don't do business, in Europe. How many of you don't do business in California? California is the 5th largest economy in the world. So, it's a high likelihood you do business in California. Or even if you don't do business in California, I think there's a very high chance, a high likelihood in the next 18 months that we will see a federal privacy law passed in the US. So that means that not only just California, not only Europe, not only Brazil, all these other countries, but there's going to be a wide-ranging impact. So what could that possibly look like? Well, what we're seeing is the evolution of modern privacy readiness and controls. It's based on common privacy principles and practices that have been around for many, many years, and were certainly exemplified in GDPR. So, what are those privacy principles? They've been around, at least since the 70s, surprisingly enough. The Consumer Protection Act in the US is a good example. So there's common principles about transparency of the data that you collect, consent to collect that data, your rights to access it, correct it, have it deleted, perhaps security and privacy by design and by default, and security according to the risk of the individual. And certainly breach notification is something that is pretty pervasive at this point. And finally, what we're really starting to see is substantial penalties for non-compliance. In the case of GDPR, that is up to 4% of your annual revenue or annual turnover, not for your subsidiary, but for your entire organization. And clearly, we're already seeing GDPR fines being levied. So in terms of preparing now, there are some steps that you can think about, and I'm going to highlight just a few of them. First is looking at your legal obligations, doing a gap analysis and understanding what your privacy policies are now and what new functions you're going to need to implement. Making sure that you include a cross-function of individuals on your privacy team. That could be HR, it could be marketing. Very important is to know what personal data assets you store, where they're located, how they're used, how long they're kept, and how do you audit and comply? How do you demonstrate that you're complying? And really, this is an executive initiative. It has to start from the top down. So if you're not already involved in your compliance program, you'll definitely want to reach out and talk to your colleagues about how you can participate, because IT is a critical part of the equation. IT is all about having a view of that data and being able to enforce many of these obligations and control access to data. Let's go to the next slide. So, what I want to also point out is that regulation is not just about avoiding fines. What we've understood and what we found out, we did a study on GDPR readiness earlier this year, is what we saw is that there's a perception that GDPR and privacy regulation will in the long run help improve relationships with individuals, what we call data subjects, and even unlock new business opportunities. We saw that 96% of the leaders in the field thought of proof of compliance being seen by the public as a positive differentiator, and that it enables more trusted relationships, not with just clients rather, but also with employees. So really, this is about building trust and building brand. And by knowing your clients better, by being more mindful of how you handle their data, what we see in the long run is those organizations are faster in terms of revenue growth, and they're much more effective in terms of customer retention. So let's go to the next and final slide, which is, as an IT practitioner, what can you do? How can you get involved? In terms of working with the privacy program, there are several things you can do, and we call this a critical data protection program. First is setting your policies, and at the IT level, that is understanding what data you collect, what is personal data, where is it located, how is it used, and then step two, creating a good treasure map using automated tools like some of our tools such as Guardian Analyzer, which we'll be talking about on Thursday, to help automate that process of identifying and finding that data in your databases and file systems. Also knowing your vulnerabilities, and that means, where are the security risks, and identifying that information risk, and then implementing security controls to protect that data according to the risk. So that's a really fast whirlwind snapshot of the world of privacy, where we see IT controls developing to help with meeting privacy and other regulations. And I hope with that I've given you a good glimpse of some steps that you can take as you start along that journey. So again, join us Thursday to learn more about how you can create a good treasure map. And with that, I'll thank you and pass it over to Mark for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. Well, it was a whirlwind tour there of privacy and GDPR. I have one question for you. What's the number one concern that you hear from mid-sized organizations regarding security?
The number one concern is they feel like they don't have enough people or bandwidth to manage the ever-increasing number of attacks. And the only way you can do that is by using technology to help accelerate. So I'd say with mid-sized firms especially, it's just not having the people, not having the expertise to protect themselves.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on the dashboard? Well, thank you very much, Cindy. I'd like at this point, as she said, please sign up for the Thursday webinar. We'll talk about going into more detail on the IBMI security platform and the Guardium solution for that. Next on our agenda is Chirag Dave and Diraj to give us our Plex TUI introductions and a Broadcom update. So, Chirag.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. This is Chirag. So with the acquisition news and basically whatever information you may have seen around CA and Broadcom, the acquisition was officially completed in the first week of November. And after that acquisition, there were a few changes which were made. And for that, the products Plex and TUI had a background of basically non-mainframe background. So because of that, what has happened is with the acquisition, Broadcom and CA, there are two divisions which have happened for CA. One is mainframe division, another is the enterprise software division. And because of that, there are certain products which were not purely mainframe or didn't have much of the mainframe background, and they were moved over to the enterprise software division. And from the history that we have for these two products, Plex and TUI, they were earlier into the non-mainframe BU, and then later on they were moved on to mainframe BU, and now it's back to the enterprise software division. So with that change, a new product manager from the enterprise software division has been assigned for Plex and TUI, and his name is Dheeraj, and he is on the call. So I'll let him introduce himself and give a background. So basically nothing changes at this point. It's business as usual. It's just that the divisions within Broadcom are aligned in a way where it makes more sense for the products to belong to. So that's the only association part which has changed. The teams, the development teams and all that, they are not affected. They stay as is. The roadmaps are as is, and they are. We are focused on the products, and nothing changes on that perspective. But I'll let Dheeraj talk about himself and probably give some sort of insight into what the future lies ahead.
Thank you very much, Chirag. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I am Dheeraj Prasad, the new product manager starting off on TUI and Plex. And as Chirag said, with the latest acquisition and closure of CA by Broadcom, from an alignment perspective, products like TUI, Plex, which are traditionally on the distributed side, have been moved under the enterprise software division. And I being with CF on the enterprise software side for a little over 2 years now, managing products like Service Desk, IT Asset Manager, Service Catalog, and FlowDoc, which are on the enterprise side of the things. It makes sense from the realignment perspective with the acquisition closure that products that are well aligned on the enterprise software division get aligned there. So that's the update from a Broadcom acquisition perspective. And as Chirag said, that apart from the changing divisions, There is nothing else that's changing. Be it the development teams that were originally working on these products, or be it the initiatives you've seen on our roadmaps. So from that perspective, nothing changes, and it's good news that the alignment is happening on the enterprise side. So right focus so that we can help our customers provide them with the best for these products. So that's the idea with the realignment, and as I said, both the development team, the roadmap, the initiatives, everything else remains same. With that, I'm open to any questions, and I'm looking forward to working with you all in the near future. Thank you very much.
The security poll question, which is, what is the #1 security concern at your organization? We'll give you a minute to respond to that. So you heard from Cindy. Now we want to hear from you. That concludes the voting on the second poll. Obviously, 37% say improving data security and encryption is the most important issue, followed by monitoring access to secure data. And then application level authorization and improving authentication and single sign-on and so forth, not as important. So definitely data security and encryption, and another reason to register for the Thursday webinar, which will be heavily about that. So thank you for having an opinion on security. Now we'll go into the lightning talk, which is CA Dispatcher Security Settings by Arun.
Hello everyone, this is Arun from Broadcom. So basically we have picked up the 2 lightning talks from CA Plex side, where we will be discussing around the security concerns. And so the first one we picked up for, both of these are related to Java variant. So the first one is like we support this SSL on Java dispatcher side, so client and server can communicate over SSL. So one thing was missing, like when we are connecting from the client to the server, so you are having all the SSL communication, but what happens is if there is any anonymous client connected to the server, so the server doesn't authenticate like whether it is the right client or where it is expected client or not. So in that front, it was sometime like difficult to identify the right client or not. So what we have done is like we have made some changes on the server side, which does like client authentication. So your client has to be passing some of the parameters from the to the server, where the server will be authenticating the client whether it is right or not. So if that handshaking is not done properly, means your client is not sending the correct data to the server, means like in case of trusted certificates and all that. So if that data is not correct, then that connection will be dropped for that particular client. So this is kind of like one more layer of authentication if there is any anonymous user connecting to the Java dispatcher server from the Plex side. So we made that change from in Java dispatcher. So if you see on the screen, like we have to keep these details on the OV server properties file, like default.service.ssl auth equal to yes. By default it is off, so if you make it yes, and then like we need to pass some parameters from the client side, like where is your key store and what is the password to open that key store file. So those things you can embed within the batch file what Plex generates. So if those parameters are passed correctly from the client side, then I think you are good to go with that particular change we have made for this one. So this change we made this change, and one of our user has validated that, so it's working fine. So we will be rolling out these changes in upcoming PTF build for 7.2.1, which will be I think PTF 004, with the more details on how to do this particular arrangement from client and server. So that's pretty much from this lightning talk 1. And moving to the next. Yeah, thank you very much. And next one is like I think a few of the users might be aware about this one. So in the same Java variant, we keep the plain password in like properties file, like client properties file, where it is kind of like sometime it is vulnerable, where we are keeping all these password in the plain txt file or plain properties file from Java side. So it's if somebody get that like properties file, so he can see that plain text what is the password of your server or any resource actually, or database and all that. So what we have done is like this is actually workaround. So we didn't give any like default solution from the Plex side, but we have a couple of source code APIs where we can use them to put this encrypted password in your properties file instead of plain text. So if you see on the screen, like the step by step we can do, like we can encrypt the password string into some encrypted way. In some third parties we can use, and we can encrypt that password and get that encrypted password and keep it inside your properties file instead of plain text. And then from the Plex side, when you read all the entries from the Plex side in the dispatcher or your client application, then what we can do is we can use these source code APIs which are already available as part of the Plex pattern libraries, like get run option value. What it does actually, it takes, you need to pass the that property name, and then what it does actually, it gets into the runtime what we have read already from the properties file and get that value. And as we have already put that value as encrypted value, we'll get that encrypted value, and then we can use our algorithm or our source code API in case of Plex and decrypt that password into whatever logic we have kept in encrypting. So once you get that decrypt it, then we can use it to connect to your server or maybe any other anything like a database and all that. So for that one, to set it on runtime, then we can use the set run option value. So it will update your runtime to with the decrypted password. So with this way, actually, you can read the encrypted password from the any file, but same time you can decrypt in on the fly in your runtime, means in your runtime logic, and then again update it back to the runtime, like with what is the decrypted password, so that you can seamlessly connect to any other resources like database and dispatcher and all that. So I didn't keep any like demo around these things. I think maybe if you have some questions, maybe we can get into more detail on these one.
Right.
So yeah,
That's fine, Arun.
yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Our next lightning talk is going to be using OAuth 2 and Keycloak in CA Plex applications by Andrew Leggett of CM First. So, Andrew, you've got the floor and the control of the screen. I just going to inform that Andrew is temporarily offline, so we'll go with Eamon for our next thing, and then come back to Andrew after that. So I'm going to advance to Lightning Talk 3.
I want to talk a little bit, keeping with the security theme, with using adopt authority in your applications. Typically, in a TUI business environment, security is broken down into two areas. You've got the object authority, usually controlled by group profiles, so that developers have perhaps one set of access. Users tend to have relatively unrestricted access to their data. And then you'll have at a higher level, you'll have usually within the application itself, some sort of a security model built in, generally giving roles and responsibilities to individual users, which give them access to specific applications or options, perhaps even using a menu with security options in there, controlling what they can see or not see and have access to. And for the most part, over the last 2 to 3 decades, that's really been a workable model for most people. However, in the past several years, with users becoming much more technically savvy than they've been in the past, and a number of additional tools being available for the business to use, the data becomes more open and available within your application. This is especially true if you've got users using certain SQL tools. Not only do they have the ability to query data, but now they can go further and actually manipulate the data outside of the controls of your data application, which tends to be a bit of a risk. I have personally seen on a number of occasions users who have inadvertently given the phone call of, I thought I was working in my personal library, but I actually updated this in production. Can you fix it? And of course, this is because they've got unrestricted access to the data because technically it's theirs. So one thing that can be done is you can use adopting authority. And what adopt authority does is allow you to keep the data at a much higher level of security, say giving nobody the ability to read access. Only if they come through your application will the security level be raised high enough for them to actually be able to access the data. This has got a two-pronged approach because it gives you the ability to protect the data and also ensure that only your application itself has control over updating it. So within 2E, this is a relatively simple action. It's actually just a change to a compile option. It can be done at the model level, and it makes it available. And that's actually really all that there is.
Well, thanks for this simple common sense approach to tightening up security on 2E, Eamon. Thank you. So now we're going to return to Andrew's lightning talk on using OAuth 2 and Keycloak in CA Plex applications.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, sorry about that. The power company decided to replace my power meter just in the middle of the meeting, so I had power cut. So everything should be back working now. So the theme of this webinar is security. So I'll be looking at a tool called Keycloak that will help us secure our web applications. So within the Plex 2E community, we have a number of web solutions out there, and it goes without saying that web applications should be secured. And there's a lot of things to consider when setting up a security framework. There's the authentication, which is just proving that the user is who they say they are. And there's a number of different procedures that you can follow here to authenticate a user. There's also the authorization, which is controlling access to just only allow certain users access to certain resources. So you have to think about what policies you want to put in place, the users, the roles, etc. So it's quite daunting to have all these requirements and to put them all in place, especially if maybe you're not from a security background. So that's where Keycloak comes in. And Keycloak is just an all-in-one management tool for security. So it is possible to run it with no programming required, though you can program if you want finer control over your security. Everything is managed through the web. So there's a user interface that you can just access through the browser, and it allows you to manage what policies you want to put in place, your users, the roles, sessions, and it'll handle all the authentication and authorization however you configure it. So it does this by working with other solutions. So it provides like a wrapper for maybe OAuth or logging on with your Google ID or your Facebook ID. All those can be kind of included in the policies you want to set up. And it's an open source product. It's maintained by the JBoss community, which is under, well, Red Hat. So there are corporate licenses available, but the kind of the leading edge is all kind of handled in open source. So it's just freely available to download and run. So this is what the user interface looks like. So there's many options in here. It goes into a lot of levels. But once you've got it running, then you just access it through the browser and just go through the menus, and there's kind of wizards that sort of walk you through the whole process. So to set up, it's very easy. You can just download the file, which is just a zip file, unzip it to a folder, and if you want to run it in standalone mode, there's just a batch file you can just double click on, and it runs in the background. There's also a domain mode for enterprise, if you want to deploy it to multiple servers, etc. So you would create up what's called a realm, and a realm is just a set of users, roles, and other settings. Each one is isolated from other realms, so you can have as many realms as you want. Then you create your users and your roles within there, and you can import from LDAP, Kerberos, and other directories. And then you create a client, which is really the kind of the workflow that sort of dictates how you will authorize your users. So again, all this is just done from the browser. And I've been testing it with Tomcat, though it will work with any other sort of enterprise web servers. And very simple to install, just a few files. And if you kind of follow a guide, you can have Keycloak working to secure your Tomcat web applications in just a matter of minutes. And the general flow, the way it works is you have your web application running on, let's say, a Tomcat server, though as I say, it can be any other server. The user will access a resource, just a request. So it could be through a browser, it could be a REST API, web services. And then if it needs to be secured, then Tomcat will direct that to Keycloak. Based on what you've configured Keycloak to do, it may send back a login page, for example, where you can provide your user and password. And once it's happy, it sends the response back to Tomcat to say everything's good, and then Tomcat can then send back the required resource as a response. So that's the general flow there. So I'll just give you a very quick demonstration of this in practice. So I have my admin console here. I've set up 3 users, Alice, Bob, and Charlie. And the policy I want to put in place is that I've got 3 websites: development, test, and production. I want my developers to have access to both production and QA, but I don't want them anywhere near production. And whereas our end users will only have access to production. So these are my users. I also have my roles in here. Oops, actually, it's been a while since I've logged in, so just go back in. There's 3 roles that I've set up, and from the Tomcat side of things, there is a web XML file, and here I just tell Tomcat what roles, and these correspond to the Keycloak roles, and then I can specify my constraints. So this constraint here is basically saying that if I want to access a URL with /development, which is my website here, then I can only access that if I have the dev role. And same for testing and production. So just a very simple test just to demonstrate this. So this is my testing website here. So when I enter this into the address bar, you'll see that it's redirected me to Keycloak and given me the Keycloak login. And I can just enter the user and password that I set up on the Keycloak admin screen. And if this is correct, then it'll direct me to the QA site. which is correct. And I should also be able to get to the development site. And again, that's all working. Though if I try to access production, then it redirects me to that I don't have access to that, and it's just showing an error page that I've configured for it. So that very quickly is Keycloak. There's a lot more than that I can demonstrate, and I'll take questions at the end of the meeting. But if you have more questions, you can contact me on this email address. So I'll now hand you back to Mark.
Great job, Andrew. Thank you. We now have the last of our poll questions, and then we're going to go into Q&A. So we've given you a lot to think about this morning. So please, any follow-on questions, put them into the dashboard. And now our final poll question, which is, which TUI and Plex modernization steps do you have planned for 2019? And I know some of you have none, so that's okay to answer like that as well. Also in version uplifts, I'm sure you're all aware of this, that CA2E 8.6 is going away on support as of the end of January 2019. So if you have not updated that or updated your IBM iOS from 7.1 to 7.3, that should be of interest to you. Okay, voting is now concluded. Most popular is doing version uplifts. So the latest versions will be 8.7 for TUI or SYNON, as some of it's still referred to, and 7.2.1 is the latest version for Plex. All the other responses are basically around 20% or so, whether it's the browser-based front end is important to you, and the replatforming or changing out your repository language and adding microservices, and then about 22% don't have any plans. So thank you for recording that answer. And now I'm going to go into some questions from the audience. So there's a question about Broadcom and plans for marketing Plex. So Dheeraj, I'll direct that question to you. A question is, does Broadcom have plans for marketing a Plex? And also, what's kind of the proper usage now that CA is a Broadcom company? Should we be referring everything to Broadcom, or kind of what are the rules of the road as you see them as a product person going forward?
Yeah. So for the second question, as of now, we're still referring to all our products as CA2E, CA Plex. We haven't heard anything from the corporate marketing that we now need to call them as Broadcom. Add the acronym of Broadcom and then spell the product. So that's something that's not going to happen as of immediate future. And that's the case even with the other products that I'm actively working on, like CA Service Management and whatnot. So, but CA Technologies is now a Broadcom company, and but apart from that, we haven't heard anything from a product nomenclature. Mm-hmm. And as and when we do hear them, we'll have them communicated via the communities. I'm sure the community managers will ensure that information goes along.
Right.
For the first question about the marketing from Broadcom, again, as the acquisition just closed out in the first week of November, it's still early days. So we haven't heard what are the activities from a marketing perspective that are going on, but our engagement with especially with CM First and with other partners will continue to happen, and we will be actively engaged in those kind of initiatives like we have been with CA Technologies while we were at CA Technologies. So that's not going to change. I hope I answered those questions.
Yes. A follow-on question to that, another audience member asking your background and experience in your new role.
Yeah, sure. So as I said when I introduced myself, I probably gave a very brief one. So I have around close to six plus years of product management experience, and more than 2 years with CA now. I have been all my life working on the distributed side of the products. Some of the products that I've worked on in CA are CA Service Desk, CA Service Catalog, the entire portfolio of the service management, which also includes the IT Asset Manager, Configuration Manager, and whatnot. And of late, I've also been managing a product called CA FlowDoc, which is on the enterprise collaboration space. If you've known Slack, HipChat, or Microsoft Teams, FlowDoc is a close competitor to those products, and that's what I have been managing for some time now. And outside my product management work, I also run a small little community here in Hyderabad. I'm based out of India, and I run a community called Product Camp Hyderabad, which I founded some time back, a couple of years back. And the idea is to give back to the product community here so that there's an opportunity for people to learn from each other, network in meaningful ways. If you want to know more, I'm happy to share.
Great. Thank you. Our next question from a listener is directed to me, asking if we've got the hotel selected for the conference. I am on the conference committee, and we'll be making that decision shortly. We do have it narrowed down, but we have not made a final decision. But the dates are firm, so plan on the end of April to the beginning of May. And then a follow-on to that for Christoph is a reader says, I've got some topics to propose for the conference. How would I do that?
Yes, we have on our website, there's the email address. You can submit ideas or abstracts for papers. I believe it's info@plex2e.com.
That is correct.
Yeah, and it will be forwarded to me and Amy, and we'll go through the abstracts and then recommend or select topics for the talks.
Okay, great. I now have several for our lightning talk speakers. Arun, does the C# dispatcher have the same security options as the Java dispatcher?
Yeah, that is only available for Java SSL option. But if you see from other side, like we discussed about saving the password in plain text. So if you see from the C# side, that option is not available. So we see that password is encrypted in the UI, but SSL part only done for Java.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our next one is for Eamon. Where can I find more info on using Adopt Authority?
Well, you can use Google is always a good friend, but I find anything you can find by Carol Woodbury. You'll find her on the mcpressonline.com website, just mcpress. She does a regular set of articles there about general state of security on the AS400, and she's got a number of great articles there. She's also written a couple of books on security on the AS400, sorry, I'm old, so it's still an AS400 to me. But Carol Woodbury is where I actually look up a lot of stuff related to security for myself.
Okay, great. I have a couple more for you, Diraj, related to roadmap. What is the next release of 2E, and have there been any changes to the roadmaps that were presented in October, which is probably not fair to you because you weren't on the job then. So.
Yeah, Chirag, do you want to take a stab at those?
Yeah, I mean, from a future perspective, I believe the roadmap doesn't change. The priorities will remain the way it is, and it'll go on the way we have planned. I'm not sure on the timelines as to, basically we are when the product was on the mainframe side, we were, as I had shared in the last webinar, that we are following the continuous delivery model, and we were releasing the PTFs, and as and when the features will come out, we'll go out and release them, and so it would be for the bug fixes. So cumulative PDF for the issues that are fixed, and feature PTFs will be released independently. From an enterprise software division, I'm not sure if we're going to still follow the same way of delivery, or is the model going to change? But as far as the roadmap is concerned, there are no changes to it.
Okay. Another listener asks, can we repeat the conference dates? So the conference dates are arriving Sunday evening, April 28th. And then we'll go through. Monday is typically a two-track training day for 2E and for Plex for trainees. And then Monday night is kind of a general arrival evening. Then Tuesday and Wednesday, we will have separate tracks for 2E and Plex, and also other technical topics of interest, probably related to the webinar topics that people showed on the first question. Then Thursday morning, the attendees like to do a deep dive. So it's a final kind of a morning session to do a deep dive in certain topics that people would just want to go in a lot more deeply and talk specifically about implementation and so forth, and really getting into it. And then again, go to plex2e.com and join that mailing list, or send info@plex2e.com if you've got more specific things or desire to volunteer or have some other ideas about how to improve our conference experience. I'll get time for one more question. Andrew, can you use Keycloak with 2E applications, and what server platforms does Keycloak currently support?
Well, basically any web-facing solution. So I don't know about 2E directly, but if you have web option or some other web interface to access it, then that can be secured. As far as the list of supported platforms, I'm not fully sure. It's based on JBoss, which is kind of shares ancestry with Tomcat and WebSphere. But yeah, I'd have to search for the platforms. But yeah, it looks like it supports pretty much everything. It's kind of a wrapper around a whole bunch of different tools and servers. So if it's commonly used one, I would think it would work.
Okay, great. Hey, I want to thank all of our speakers this morning, and people. We had quite an advanced agenda there. We're coming right up on the top of the hour. So this does include our last webinar for 2018. And we wanted to wish, in the community want to wish everybody around the world, a lot of joy and happiness for this holiday season. And we have a final follow-up survey for you as you exit the conference. So again, this is thank you very much for your kind attention today, and it's a really wonderful turnout. And please have a safe holiday season and a productive and prosperous 2019. Thank you.